Back in July 2020, we released a video on the Philippine resistance against Japan in the Second World War. That video was more of an overview. We didn't really go into the logistics of the Philippine resistance movement, which, with more than 7,000 islands composing the Philippine archipelago, was a bit of a nightmare. In this video, we're going to explore said logistics with the aid of a report prepared by the staff of American General Douglas MacArthur and released to the public after his death. Launching the invasion from Taiwan, the Japanese hit the beaches of the Philippines on the 9th of December 1941. Defending the archipelago was some 150,000 American and Filipino troops under the United States Army Forces in the Far East, or the USA FFE, the US Navy, and the Philippine Army. Douglas MacArthur was in charge of them all, and he ultimately failed to stave off the Japanese advance. After escaping to Australia, having been ordered to by President Roosevelt, MacArthur swore he would come back. In the general's words, "I came out of Bataan, and I shall return." And he did, eventually. But a whole lot happened in the Philippines in the meantime. The Japanese occupation was, as you might expect, brutal. After some 76,000 malnourished American and Filipino defenders surrendered in Bataan in April 1942, the Japanese subjected them to the infamous Bataan Death March, in which as many as 10,000 of them died. From 1941 to 1945, the Japanese raided and looted, raped local women and took them as sex slaves, conducted sadistic medical experiments on prisoners, and straight up butchered people in atrocities such as the Manila Massacre, in which some 100,000 civilians' lives were taken from them. With the American and Filipino forces dead, imprisoned, or scattered, the people took matters into their own hands, rising up against the Japanese in loose vigilante groups. As stated in MacArthur's report, the small vigilante groups that were formed soon banded together for greater strength and mutual protection, and they later combined forces with the unsurrendered soldiers of the United States and Philippine forces and provided the nucleus for the guerrilla resistance movement. Coordinating their efforts wasn't easy though. As per MacArthur's report, the island's topography was a tremendous handicap to any effective unification of strength. Isolated from each other and from the outside world, the guerrillas at first dissipated their efforts in uncoordinated raids against the enemy. These minor operations were generally fruitless and often did more harm than good, since they brought swift and severe retaliatory measures by the Japanese. Still, the Allies came to comprehend the fighting spirit of the Filipino guerrillas and would not let it go to waste. MacArthur's report divided the progression of the resistance movement into 3 distinct phases, punctuated by the general's return in 1944. In Phase 1, the joint American, Australian, British, and Dutch Allied Intelligence Bureau, or AIB, sat back, took a deep breath, and tried to figure out exactly what it had to work with and how to go about it. As we said, there are over 7,000 Philippine islands. The guerrillas were isolated physically and also in terms of radio communication. Just one radio station remained in operation after May 1942. This was located in Luzon and manned by the Philippine Army officer Guillermo Nakar. In August, the Japanese found Nakar and killed him, severing all communication with the outside world. If it wasn't for American officers, Captains William Osborne and Damon Gowes, who escaped over the sea to Australia, MacArthur would have been left totally in the dark. Learning that the Filipinos were standing up to their oppressors, the AIB set about installing an intelligence network so it could better understand the situation and coordinate future activities. According to MacArthur's report, solutions were worked out for the best methods of dispatching supplies and funds to the Philippines. Areas of responsibility were defined, and plans were made for communication channels to forward information to Australia. Then, the field operatives went in. On the 27th of December, Filipino captain Jesus Villamor, along with 5 men, departed Australia on the submarine Giorgi. A month later, they made radio contact from the Philippines. At around the same time, 2 men under the command of the unsurrendered American colonel Wendell Fertig reached Australia and further enlightened the Allies of the situation in the Philippines. Fertig, who had become a guerrilla leader on the island of Mindanao, recommended that the Allies make a guerrilla base there, so they sent in American commander Charles Parsons to check it out. After he'd met with Fertig, Parsons continued throughout the Philippines to gather intel. In June 1943, Philippine Army Major Emigdio Cruz arrived in Australia from the US and then went on a clandestine mission in the Philippines at the behest of the exiled president of the Philippines, Manuel Quezon. If the Japanese had caught Cruz, they would have tortured him to death. And still, he traveled throughout the Philippines in various guises, gaining vital intel and ultimately receiving a Medal of Honor for his bravery. Thanks to men such as these, the intelligence network had a strong foundation, and MacArthur and the AIB had taken some major steps in support of the Philippine resistance movement. Of note, they had established basic radio communications and were ready to further improve their systems. They had transported military supplies and personnel to the islands via the US Navy, and they had grouped the Philippines' various guerrilla organizations into 3 main categories. This was how said categories were defined in MacArthur's report. Those built around a nucleus of unsurrendered United States and Philippine Army troops, those of purely local origin under the leadership of prominent civic personages or former constabulary, and those, like the Hukbalahaps, which were an outgrowth of pre-war semi-political organizations. There are also a few roving bands of the outlaw variety, which were motivated more by the lucrative prospects of brigandage. Now, Phase 2 could begin. By mid-1943, 2 major guerrilla leaders with whom MacArthur and the AIB worked were the aforementioned Fertig, who operated out of Mindanao, and Macario Peralta, a Filipino lieutenant colonel who operated out of Panay. Phase 2 was all about supporting these men and earning the loyalty of and supporting many other guerrilla leaders, so that they could consolidate resistance efforts in the Southern Islands and then in Luzon, where the Japanese were strongest. MacArthur wouldn't risk too direct of an approach, however. As per the report, MacArthur directed that his agents follow a policy of careful instruction without direct command interference, which might incur resentment. Guerrilla groups were cautioned to refrain from open warfare against Japanese troops. The collection, coordination, and transmission of useful intelligence were stressed as the most important contributions the guerrillas could make, until the actual Allied invasion of the islands began. Before that time, all military operations were to be limited to strategic harassment, sabotage, and ambush. Throughout the latter half of 1943 and all of 1944, the resistance movement grew in all ways. The civil government and the locals coordinated with and made voluntary contributions to the guerrillas, who created their own currency and postal system. Agricultural production and distribution were ramped up, and the communications network swelled, with radio stations installed throughout most of the southern Philippines by the end of 1943. Cargo submarine landings increased throughout 1944 as well, with the US Navy unloading more and more military personnel and supplies. All of this was in preparation for MacArthur's liberation of the Philippines, which he launched in October 1944. In Phase 3, quote, "The guerrillas emerged from their hideouts to take their places in battle beside the advancing American divisions. Now, they could engage in open war." On the 20th, MacArthur marched onto a beach in Leyte, where the US 6th Army, aided by some 3,200 guerrillas under Filipino Colonel Ruperto Canglion, went toe-to-toe with the Japanese 14th Area Army, claiming victory in late December. According to the report, this was where the Filipino guerrilla and the American soldier first joined forces in battle. The report continued. Canglion's forces dynamited key bridges to block Japanese displacement toward the target area, harassed enemy patrols, and sabotaged supply and ammunition depots. The guerrillas also performed valuable service in maintaining public order and in keeping the roads and highways free of congestion. After the American beachheads were established, the Leyte guerrilla groups were attached directly to the 6th Army to assist in scouting, intelligence, and combat operations. By then, Fertig had some 38,000 guerrillas under his command on Mindanao. Working from the island's interior to its coast, these men undertook a number of offensives against the Japanese, capturing many of their bases, including the airfields at Dipolog, Labo, Lala, and Barob, before MacArthur's forces had a chance to. MacArthur's report also commented on the importance of Fertig's radio and intelligence network. It consisted of some 70 transmitter stations and an excellent and extensive Coast Watcher system that helped considerably in the planning of further operations against the Japanese. Something similar happened with Peralta's guerrillas on Panay. According to the report, when the US 40th Division went ashore on Panay in March 1945, Colonel Peralta's forces made a large contribution toward eliminating the Japanese. Even before the landings, his guerrillas had cleared the enemy from the outlying districts and had won possession of 9 airstrips in the northern and southern parts of the island. As for the northern island of Luzon, due to the high Japanese presence there, the guerrillas were still scattered by the time of the liberation. Most guerrilla leaders weren't even aware that MacArthur was coming back until about a month before he set foot on that beach. Resistance fighters under American Major Bernard Anderson occupied a swath of southern Luzon. When the US 6th Army landed on the island, some of Anderson's best men were attached to the 6th, composing what was known as the Anderson Battalion. According to the report, this unit performed efficiently and valiantly throughout central and eastern Luzon and built a battle record of 3,000 Japanese killed and 1,000 captured. Japanese Colonel Kobayashi later paid tribute to Anderson, stating, "We attempted to extirpate the guerrilla movement in Luzon. Unfortunately for us, however, Colonel Anderson was too good a leader and the American guerrillas continued to function." In central Luzon, guerrilla units fought under Major Robert Lapham. Among other things, Lapham and his men helped rescue some 500 Allied prisoners from the infamous Cabanatuan POW camp. As stated in the report, the guerrillas acted as the eyes of the raiding force to guide it through the brush, and as its ears to be on the alert for any surprise flanking movement by the enemy. As for northern Luzon, many guerrillas answered to American Major Russell Volkmann, who had built up a force of some 10,000 men by late 1944, as well as an effective intelligence network of his own, though he wasn't able to get through to MacArthur until September 1944. Still, his guerrillas fought valiantly. To quote the report, Colonel Volkmann's units fought effectively with the 1st Corps against General Yamashita's beleaguered forces in the high mountains around Kiangan and in the plains of the Cagayan Valley. Supported by planes of the 5th Air Force, these guerrillas were able to clear the enemy entirely from Ilocos Norte province. As many as 260,000 guerrillas from 277 different guerrilla units fought the Japanese during the war. Combined, they played a major role in the Allied liberation of their islands, an operation that came to a close in mid-August 1945. Famously, MacArthur said, "Give me 10,000 Filipinos, and I shall conquer the world." But what do you think? Were you aware of how difficult it was to coordinate all of these guerrilla groups? Did you know that the Allies supplied them through cargo submarines? Do you know anything about the Philippine resistance movement and its logistics that we didn't cover in this video? Please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section below.